Aaron Rockman H here with you. Before we get into today's program, I got a quick announcement to make. It was about a month ago. We ran a contest, more or less a giveaway. We had the Robert from Lazarus Grimm on the program, giving away a couple of his CDs. He also has a CD under a different name, Veil Bright, and we got a few of those to give away. I asked everybody who was interested in a CD to leave comments, and some of you have done so. We may even have a couple CDs left over. So if you haven't gotten in on the contest or giveaway, you still may be able to. What I need from you guys now is to email the podcast. Let us know where to send the CDs. I tried to respond to a couple of you guys replying to your comments and haven't heard back. So the easiest way now is email the podcast at rockandmetal.faith@gmail.com. I think that's correct. You can double check. The email is definitely in our show notes anyways. So email the podcast. Let us know where you want us to send the CDs. And thank you. Now, on to the program.
On the set had a show booked at this church, and news that it had been canceled, that they were not going to handle One Bad Pig anymore. And the very same day, we got turned down by Unclean Records because the people that distributed Unclean, his national distribution from the West Coast of punk and punk stuff, said no, it's Christian, and we're not putting that out there. And so that became the name of the first EP, a Christian band, Banned, play on word. We were banned from both the Christian, venue and the punk secular record label the same day.
On this edition of the Rock and Metal Faith podcast, we get to talk to the lead screamer, Carey Kosher Womack of One Bad Pig. Welcome back to the Rock and Metal Faith podcast, or welcome if you're just joining us for the first time. This is where music and faith collide. If you like hardcore Jesus rock and roll, or are curious to what it's all about, then you've come to the right place. So come and join us as we rock the hell out of you, as we rock for the King. I'm your host, as always, Aaron Rockman H. Joined as always with my co-host, Chris. How are you doing there, Chris?
I'm doing good. How are you? I hope our fans are doing well out there. Our 1 or 2 fans.
We've got a few more. We don't have any new subscribers or comments to talk about this week. We're actually recording this rather quickly, soon after the last episode. Normally we take a couple of weeks to record, and there's a little bit of news. Actually, one thing in the news, though, since I got you on here, because I mentioned this on the bonus episode, I just released the October bonus talking about the birthdays, so we won't have to worry about that. But we haven't really talked about the new Petra single. What do you think of that?
Wow, it rocks. I like it. I've been sharing with everyone who I know. Check this out. It's still the same Petra. You can still hear the little nuances, right?
Yeah, it's a good song. And I think, like I said, I did mention that on the October bonus, that we both liked it. We didn't have a chance to talk about it on the episode, so we're talking about it now, real briefly.
I tried putting it on our website today, and, well, that didn't work very well, so I'll have to try later. So,
all right, yeah, we'll get that out there. Actually, that's a good idea. Actually, and the other thing, too, we should mention is, we've got to a Facebook site, and we got a website as well. And we can, get a hold of us through email. All these links are going to be on the show notes, and we love to hear from you. So let us know what you think of
We would
today's
die to
interview.
hear from you.
Yeah. And like I said, we don't have any new subscribers to talk about this week, probably because it's been soon after the last one. I haven't given enough time for people to respond yet, or as far as comments wise. So
Yeah.
that'll become probably next episode. All right. Yeah. So today we get to talk to Carey Kosher Womack of One Bad Pig. We did review of the Ice Cream Sunday a few episodes ago. You might want to check that out. Today we get to actually talk to him. All right. Like I said, we are joined now with Carey Kosher Womack of One Bad Pig. How are you doing, Carey?
I'm doing great, and it's good to be talking with you guys.
Great. Yes. This is actually exciting for us too. So, been a fan of the band quite a while. You guys were started quite many years ago, I guess.
Oh yeah.
How first question we like to ask actually is about everybody's faith, and how did you first come to know God?
Yeah. So I had parents, I was very blessed. Sometimes everybody likes to hear a testimony of how horrible their life was and they came to the Lord, and it's such an exciting testimony. But really, my testimony, I was very fortunate, at least in coming to Christ, in that I had a couple of God-fearing parents that were in church all the time, and they dragged me there, every time the doors were open. And when I was 6 years old and at a vacation Bible school, I made a profession of faith at that time, and I went home and I told my parents. And then, the next time we were in church, I think it was a Sunday evening, we went up and made a public profession of faith there, and I was baptized. And I had some doubts later on in my teenage years. Was I really saved at that point or not? And the Lord just gave me some insight that um, some memories that I could kind of look back on and see that He had His hand on me even then. And, what does a little kid do in the worship service? Nothing, but I could remember that I started paying attention to the hymns and started paying attention to what the preacher was saying and that kind of thing. And it began to make more sense to me. And so, um, I, I saw evidence looking backwards, even though I had some problems as a teenager, that my spirit had been quickened and made alive to the Lord, and that then my mind and other things were starting to respond to that as I continued to be exposed to opportunities to worship and hear the word preached and all of that. So that's basically how I came to the Lord.
Right. Well, good. Yeah. Lots of us have come, I think, being raised in the church, and then at some point making the decision that, yes, this is truly what I believe. And I know lots of us, myself included, being raised in the church will kind of backslide, teenage years, you kind of walk away and then you come back and all that. It's a common testimony, but it's still, I think, a powerful testimony.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did all that uh, in your teenage years? How did that get you to what you've done now? With One Bad Pig.
Right. So I, continued to go into to church and all of that kind of thing. And I think it was really junior high years that I um, felt like I didn't fit in, and was looking for a peer group. And it was kind of funny because in my junior high, one of the sort of not easily accepted group of peers was the kicker group, and they were the cowboy boots and western hats and chewing tobacco. And then the other group were the freaks, and they were the pot smoking, rock and roll listening, crew. And I had kind of friends in both, and sort of had my feet in both worlds a little bit at that time. Um, and and I grew up in a teetotaling household, but I was introduced to alcohol by a friend that lived down actually on the street below me. I was up on top of a hill, and and we would go wait at the bus stop together, and we would drink like, we'd find half smoked cigarettes and half empty cans of beer and drink that and that kind of thing. And just sort of started experimenting from there with alcohol and stuff, and then buying it. And so that was kind of my exposure. And even though I continued going to church throughout all this time, it was in the summer prior to ninth grade that this friend said, when we get to be in high school, people are having sex all the time. And there's going to be a big market for rubbers. There's going to be a big market for condoms. And he said, we can go and we can break into this store and we can steal a bunch of that stuff, and we can steal a bunch of wine and beer and whatever else. So we had a dry run one time in which I was asleep in my bed, and I didn't wake up at the appointed time. And so I can't remember if he broke into our house or just tapped on the window long enough until he woke me up. And we went out and we broke into a 7-Eleven. The alarm rang really, really loud, and we ran away. And then a week or several days later, we went down to the little grocery store that was near, maybe a mile or a mile and a half from our house. And it had an adjoining pharmacy to it. It wasn't like, a modern day supermarket with a pharmacy in it, but it was a separate business with a connecting, like, folding doorway. And so we went in there, broke in there, and so when we opened that sliding door to the pharmacy to get the condoms and whatever else that we found in there, big time silent alarms went off at the police department because they were breaking into a drugstore. We didn't even have drugs on our mind at that time. And so we were hauling all this stuff, trips with our arms loaded with cases of beer and wine, whatever, and and other things out the back of this store. And all of a sudden, in front of the store, I saw, the police's lights flashing, and we said something, and we ran out the back, and he ran one way, I ran the other. I ran down a hill. The cop cars came off the hill, and I went into an area where there was a bunch of rushes and stuff, but it was kind of dry, and they said, get down on your face, because they caught up to me pretty quick. And I did, and I got dirt on my face when I fell straight down on my face. And they said, were you trying to disguise yourself or something like that? And I said, no, you told me to get on my face, and I got on my face. And so it's 3:30 in the morning or something like that. I don't remember the exact hour. And I'm calling my parents from the police station, and the phone is near my mom. And so she picks up the phone, and she's half asleep, and what? Hello? And Mom, it's Carey, and I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm in the police station, And she said, what? Maybe you should talk to your dad, So hands the phone over to Dad, and what a painful thing, to tell your dad that this is where you're at. And so they transported me from there to the juvenile detention facility in Austin. At the time was called the Gardner House, which was interesting because we had some neighbors on top of our little tiny neighborhood that was a circle on top of this hill, and about 3 houses down were the Gardners. So that was sometimes a cause for confusion. Yeah, I live near the Gardner House. So anyway, but my dad drives me home in the morning and is just silent. And later I appear before the juvenile judge, and and it's like, well, are there problems at home? And no, not really. And well, what do you do in your spare time? Well, I go to church a couple of times a week, and we're in the youth choir. And well, what else? And you make good grades in school. Yeah, I make pretty good grades in school. And well, so what else do you do? Well, I'm in the Boy Scouts, and so I'm telling all this stuff to the judge, and I'm put on probation, and I'm just kind of mixed up at this time, and go into ninth grade, and my
Mm-hmm.
probation officer, who happens to be a good-looking woman, will visit me, every week or two at lunchtime, and I'm sort of, bragging about this, you know, woman that's coming to see me, my probation officer, and trying to act all tough. But all of that did not last very long. And really, something that happened to me, I went to youth camp with my church every summer, and I think it was, after the eighth grade, that same summer, I recommitted my life to Christ, and it lasted this long. And after ninth grade year, I recommitted my life to Christ at youth camp, and it lasted this long. And after 10th grade, I committed my life to Christ, but I started reading a chapter of Scripture every night, and my growth in the Lord took off from that point. Um, and somebody, I don't know where the idea, but one chapter of the Bible every night. Occasionally I'd miss it, not very often. Occasionally I'd fall asleep in the middle of it, not very often. And I would underline stuff that meant something to me. Every time I read it, even if I didn't really understand it, I tried to find something that meant something to me every time I read it. And it's not that I didn't have a lot of problems later on, but that was the real, I guess, genesis of consistent Christian growth that lasted a while. And how did that get me into One Bad Pig? Well, so one of the things, I became a leader in my youth group. After the 10th grade year, I guess it was, I felt like maybe I was called to preach. No, I take maybe that was after 11th grade, and and I could even look back on my childhood later. I didn't remember it at the time, but when I was like a tween, and we were on a family summer vacation with another family. They were both professors, my dad and this other guy, and they were going to a conference like at Colorado State or something like that, an engineering conference. But we were somewhere in the Rockies one day, and we were sitting around a picnic table, and some of the other kids had gone off to play, and I'm still sitting there with the adults. And they say, "So, Carey, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And at various times I wanted to be a Longhorn football player, and then a pro football player, or I wanted to be an engineer like my dad or something. But it popped out of my mouth at that time, I want to be a preacher. I still don't know where that came from, but the Lord brought it back to my memory later on, and it's like, wow, that's wild. And then after the summer, I graduated from high school. I was a youth minister out in West Texas, where my cousin was the pastor of a church, and I came back, and I developed a relationship with, then went off to college, of course, and I started having other problems there. And I had a girlfriend that was going to the University of Texas that was a year ahead of me. So she was a sophomore at Texas. I was a freshman at Baylor, and I was going to study psychology and eventually become a preacher. That was the plan. And had already done some preaching in various places and stuff. And problems developed with this girl. I kept going back every weekend to see her, and didn't get enough involved in my school, got behind on my schoolwork. I'd gone on a scholarship, all this kind of stuff. And somewhere in there, I started drinking again, drinking for myself. There had been some social drinking with my girlfriend. When I really started to grow in Christ, there wasn't a lot of that, I mean, there was none of that for a long time. But with this girlfriend and a sorority in Texas, I started drinking a little socially. And then from there, it became when we started having problems and I started struggling in school, I would go off by myself and drink and get drunk. And that was a pattern that would reappear from time to time without having victory over it, really. And it was also at Baylor in that freshman year. I guess before that, my closest thing to Christian rock music I'd ever heard was one day I was listening to that AM radio station and heard um, Water Grave by the Imperials and Russ Taff. And it was kind of a rocking track for them. And then
Okay.
when I went to Baylor, my freshman year, and especially the second semester, there's some guys there that were into Daniel Amos and Resurrection Band. And before going to that, just from sort of the youth group stuff, it was like, and my roommate that first year in college, it was the Imperials Priority album. That was the thing. But I met these other guys and they got me introduced into DA and Res Band. And so my kind of, and I've never been a huge music fan before, but my thirst uh, for spiritual things and music that really clicked, it really started clicking at that point in my life. And because of that relationship with that girlfriend, the drinking, whatever else, I came back to Austin and worked at a Christian bookstore part time. Actually, I did that. I pastored a part time pastored of a small Southern Baptist church from '84 to '86, and that even during that period, there was the occasional slip, with alcohol and that kind of thing. And I can remember going to the church for like a Bible study or something like that with still feeling, a little hungover or feeling, kind of the dead feeling of alcohol on my breath at that time. And it was also in that period. It was I went to the very first Cornerstone Festival, Cornerstone '84, with a good friend, and then Cornerstone '85. I went back with that same friend and a guy that was living in Austin at the time who went by the name Freedom. His name is Melvin Nobles, but he sort of considered himself kind of a Jesus freak and a Jesus person, and sort of emulated himself over the Jesus people, group in Chicago. And he went with us, and Paul Kupek went with us. And that was actually '85. We stopped traveling from Texas toward, Grace Lake, Illinois, and we stopped outside St. Louis at a radio station. I mean, at a Pizza Hut that was doing a promotion with a local radio station called Keishi. And Keishi had this a logo, a pig. It was a rock station, an album rock station in Chicago, and I mean in St. Louis. And they were selling at the Pizza Hut these wraparound chrome sunglasses that had a pig logo, the Keishi logo on it. I didn't know that her name was Sweetmeat and that she was a female pig. But we all got these glasses, and I said, "Man, that is one bad pig." And Paul said, "That sounds like a punk band."
Oh.
And it became the running joke for our entire trip to Cornerstone. And we were making up choruses and yelling them. And we said, well, Freedom will play bass and Paul will play guitar and Curtis will play hubcaps, and dashboard because we're beating on the car, and Carey, we'll call my nickname will be Kosher, and I'll be the lead screamer, and so that was a running joke throughout that Cornerstone Festival. Meanwhile, back in Austin, the four of us and a bunch of other friends we knew were part of a group of people that loved alternative Christian music, and and we decided that we were going to get together a local festival of artists. And sort of coinciding with this, Paul Kupek was a DJ at the local AM Christian radio station. It was talk most of the time, but had music sometimes. And he got to do a rock show on Friday or Saturday nights. I think it changed depending on the year or whatever. And some of us would go down when it was time for him to do the radio show, and we'd hang out in the lobby while he did the radio show, and afterwards kind of hang out. Sometimes we'd pray, and somewhere in there we went to a venue in Austin called Liberty Lunch, where the band Trouble was playing, and they had a bunch of local Austin punk bands opening up. And we all went down there one night after Paul's radio show. And we saw these kids that were, 12, 13, 14, coming out of there bleeding and stuff like that from the mosh pit. And we thought, man, these kids should not be at the show. And we started doing street witnessing. And so that became a regular thing. Friday or Saturday night, we'd go down, we'd hear Paul do his show, we'd pray together, then we'd go out to one of the clubs where some metal bands or more often punk bands were playing, and we would, do some street witnessing out there. And so while that's happening, we're also planning this local Christian music festival at a park in Austin, and we called it the Labor Day Christian Music Festival, 1985. And somewhere along the way, we said, wouldn't it be funny if One Bad Pig were to appear at the Labor Day Christian Music Festival, kind of as a joke, And so we worked up a few cover songs that Undercover and Altar Boys, that were out there, Lifesavers, before they were LSU. And we worked up a couple of cover tunes, and we wrote an original song that was called Anarchy is Prison. And we were rehearsing it, one weekend night at that radio station when everybody else was gone. And Paul's girlfriend at the time, who didn't like rock music, really, she heard us do Anarchy is Prison. She said, man, that is powerful. And so we played at the Labor Day Christian Music Festival, and it was sort of like, it was a great big joke, but it was also completely serious. And even though we just shocked people, we got all kinds of good feedback of, y'all were the highlight of the thing, and you ministered more than anybody. And we prayed with a kid to get saved, afterwards, backstage at the thing. And that was sort of the beginning. And it worked out into some of the places where we would go street witnessing. One of the bands that we would kind of banty back and forth with off and on, they were a group called Criminal Crew. One night outside the Continental Club on South Congress in Austin, they said, hey, if we're playing here, whatever night, what if we let you come on stage and play a song just for one night, just one song while we're doing that? And we said, yeah, we'll do it. And so we played the one song, and it was kind of wild. And anyway, we started playing primarily punk shows in Austin, and that's where One Bad Pig got its start. Yeah. I've never done music before.
Is there video of the early days of One Bad Pig?
I don't know if there's really video, but it was pretty crazy. I mean, so one of the clubs near the University of Texas campus that was that had tons of punk shows at it was called The Beach, and there's a couple of infamous things that happened there. There was a band from, I think, Boston or somewhere called Kill Slug. And they came through one night and they said, yeah, man, our purpose is to destroy music completely. And we were pretty sure they were having a lot of success because it was really bad, And then there was a local band with a lead singer named George called the Inepts. and he was just rail thin. And I think it was just because of all the drinking that he was doing. He undoubtedly was alcoholic, but he got up on stage one night and puked all over everything, and we played after that,
Oh,
and there was a girl that
Oh
came
man.
up and she rolled around in the vomit that was there on stage, and then she grabbed onto my leg, and all this stuff while we're playing at the beach, and we would play some of the originals that we were developing then, and then we would play still a bunch of cover songs, altar boys, undercover, lifesavers, and there's a lifesaver song that it just ends cold, and the and there's a line screamed at the end because Jesus is totally real and I love him. And so I'm saying that right in the face of the crowd, and it's a stage that's 2 feet high at the most, and I mean it's there with all the kids that are there, and so we had lots and lots of conversations that were created coming out of that, and um, that's what we did off and on, and we would play shows out toward Houston, we'd play shows in Dallas and ones in Austin every once in a while, a Christian show at a church or something like that. Um, we There was a guy in Austin that had a private label called Unclean Records. When we had put together enough songs that we thought we could do an EP, and we found a guy named Carey Kosher that was a Christian, but that was a recording engineer, just at a regular studio in Austin. And he got us some comp time at the studio, along with some woman that we knew that she was hanging out with Mike Peters from The Alarm at one point when they came through town. But anyway, we recorded this thing with Carey Kosher, and then we started kind of shopping it around locally. And so this local guy had a label called Unclean Records, and he was distributed by, oh gosh, now I'm forgetting the name of the label, but they distributed like Dead Kennedys and stuff at the time, I think, out on the West Coast. I can't remember the name of the label. And anyway, so he was considering doing us, and he said, I don't believe in what you guys believe in, but he said, that's punk, that's cool, whatever, your music is radical, and, we like it. And so we did that, and then, like I said, we'd been playing some church shows, and there was a local church that did a lot of Christian concerts and Christian rock concerts, and there was a song. They had some doubts about us, and especially we had a song called "Lies," and part of the song "Lies," the devil is speaking, and I would put on a devil mask as we performed that song, and then when we got to the chorus, it's all lies, lies, lies. I'd tear off the mask and throw it down on the ground and stomp on it and all this stuff. But apparently their preacher decided that's, one bad pig is just a little bit too far. Not going to do that. So on the same day, we had a show booked at this church, and we got the news that it had been canceled, that they were not going to handle One Bad Pig anymore. And the very same day, we got turned down by Unclean Records because the people that distributed Unclean, his national distribution from the West Coast that did a lot of punk stuff and well-known punk stuff, said no, it's Christian and we're not putting that out there. And so that became the name of the first EP, a Christian band, BANNED, play on words. We are a band, but we were banned from both the Christian, venue and the punk secular record label the same day. So that was that. Later on, we wanted to host. We decided that we wanted to bring in Undercover, me and a friend, to play in Austin, and we found a place that would take him, an all-ages club north of town, and we decided One Bad Pig would open. And I guess it was maybe during the song 6 or something, and I'm pretty heavy now, I was heavier then, and I was wearing a T-shirt uh, that I'd written like anarchy with a no anarchy sign on it, like with magic marker on a T-shirt, and I had on some kind of vest and some kind of jacket, And when we got to talking about, you know, how I was torn, I tore the T-shirt apart, and there's my flab hanging out in front of everything. The other guys of the band rushed over and used some of my pins to pin me back together. So, um, sometime after that, we stopped playing so actively. A couple of things had happened. One of which was I had another breakup with another girl, and it was not a godly. In fact, I was working at a head injury rehab hospital, uh, young adult and upper adolescent males, frequently violent and all of that kind of thing, and a lot of stuff going on with that at the time. But at some point, I got involved. People would get off work, and it had been tension filled, and we'd get off work at 11:30 at night, midnight, and a lot of those folks that worked there would go to somebody's house, and there'd be a lot of drinking and smoking and whatever, and I would never go do that. But at some point, I went there and did that, and I would started to drink a little. First time or two I went to hang out, I didn't drink. Then I started to drink a little. And one of those nights, I ended up sleeping with the woman whose house it was, and I was living. At that point, I had started to live kind of a double life, and I'd also, for a variety of reasons, somewhere in there, I said I'd part-time pastored this little Southern Baptist church. I resigned from there at one point, and there were a multitude of reasons there. I'll say a big one was my immaturity, and I'll say, and not knowing what I was doing. Part of it was one bad pig, part of it was other things. But that was sort of a down time and a rebounding kind of time for me that was not good. And I lost another important girlfriend somewhere in there as I was a youth pastor at a church. And so at this point, I'm not serving at a church anywhere. I'm just working, and I end up in this relationship with this woman, and somewhere along the way, I meet the woman that became my wife, and I realized, I've got to get out of this. I'm sinning all the time, and I don't even really, I'm not really attracted to this woman, but it's, whether I am or not, it's just wrong, and the drinking is wrong. And so I made the decision, and I cut off my relationship with that woman, who I also worked with and had to see on a pretty regular basis. And at that point, One Bad Pig was doing very little, just kind of piddling around. And I one day at work, then as I had cut off that relationship and started repairing my spiritual life and so on and so forth, One Bad Pig began to get a little more active again. And we started going to some shows again and started having some Christian shows again. And about that time, and I'd met the woman that would become my wife somewhere in there. And I got a phone call. And well, I guess after that, I'd actually gone on a first date with my wife. And our first date was to a White Heart concert in Austin. And the Paul Kupek band, which was his pop rock band, a little bit alternative. He's loved Peter Gabriel, so it was, very different than One Bad Pig. But pop rock, he can sing like anything, he can play anything. He had good musicians in the band. And they were opening up, and they thought this was going to be our big, break, because Whiteheart's going to be there. They're going to see us perform and all of that. And so we performed, and somewhere along the way, we had a really rough demo that One Bad Pig had sent off a few places, including to Billy Smiley. And so the show happened, and Billy was not interested in meeting with the Paul Kupek band. He was interested in meeting with One Bad Pig. And so Paul Kupek and my wife, Paul Kupek and myself, a friend of ours that was a pastor at our church, associate pastor at our church, Maury Milliken, and then my wife, we're on our first date after the concert. We went to go have a business meeting, with Billy Smiley from Whiteheart, late at night. But she thought that was kind of cool. I thought, I might be really hurting myself here by, not just sticking with her. But she ended up thinking it was cool. And Billy was
Wow.
saying, yeah, man, I'm looking to produce somebody a little different. Maybe, like Bon Jovi is really big right now, maybe something like that. And we're thinking, we are the last thing to Bon Jovi that you will ever find. But we had a good meeting, and we ended up, going out and doing demos with him and stuff like that. But somewhere between the first date with Billy with Sarah, and then meeting Billy Smiley that night, one day I got a phone call from, or maybe it was it was a phone call from this woman. And she said, could you meet me in such and such office here at work? And she told me that she was pregnant, and what was I going to do about it? And I said, I'm going to handle my responsibility, but I know that our relationship was wrong and I shouldn't have been in it. And that's why I got out of it. I left out of there, and it was sort of a field I walked across to the parking lot where I had my car, and I was just yelling out, "Oh God, oh God." I mean, really yelling it. I'm not like I'm doing it nice here for this, but I'm just yelling it from my heart, just heart wrenching. Oh God, what am I going to do? And I drove, and I found a payphone, and I called Maury Milliken, this associate pastor, and we met at a place that is well known in Austin for their burgers, Dan's Hamburgers, and he met with me, and I told him everything that had happened, and Maury was perfect, and by that I mean that he completely condemned my actions and the behaviors that I had showed. But he also said, God still loves you. God will forgive you. There's a way out of this. I'm going to walk with you on the way out of this. And we're going to figure out the right things to do. And you're going to do them. And I'm going to support you. And God is not done with you. God will still minister through you. And so that became a process of me telling Sarah, and she agreed that, it's less than a month after our first date, that we would take some time apart, and I just bared my soul. I said, here I am, I'm already falling in love with you, and I found this out, and I want to make a change. And, and by the way, me being sexually involved, part of that was the drinking that I'd gotten back into socially in this case, instead of off by myself somewhere. And even after I had that wonderful meeting with Maury Milliken, I don't know if it was that night or a day or two later, I went out and just got wasted, drunk. And so Sarah, I bared my soul to her, and she called me back several days later, and she said, I'm interested in meeting with you, and uh, and talking about whether or not our relationship can maybe continue, but it's going to be under certain conditions. And she had a
Mm-hmm.
little notebook size, like I think it was purple notebook paper, and she'd written down a list of several different things that she wanted me to do if we were going to do this. And one was, to do Christian counseling. One was to keep her well informed of everything that was going on. One was to go to AA and stop drinking, and there were some other things there that she put on the list. And meanwhile, I told the band, and we met with not only Maury, the associate pastor, but our head pastor, Jason Knox, and they kind of laid down the law to us and said, look, um, we want to rebuild Carey and restore Carey, but here's the deal. Anything that you've got booked right now, and there were 2 or 3 things, you can go ahead and do those. But they said, but we don't want Carey to preach from the stage during those things. Somebody else can do the preaching in those situations. And then he said, we don't want you to book any other gigs until later on. And so we did that. We met with them. I met with Jason regularly. I went to AA. I went, got some Christian counseling. We did some Christian counseling together. My wife and I, my girlfriend at the time. And God used all those people to work me through that, and not to just continue on the same path that I had been on. But actually, I had been sober since April. No, I always mess this up. I guess it was from May. I'm forgetting my date. May the 15th of 1985. I've been sober. No, not of 1985, of 1988. I've been sober since that time. So God's brought me through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, God is definitely good, and it's good you have some godly people and help along the way to,
Oh
I guess,
man,
lead you on the right path back again.
absolutely, absolutely. He's really, really good.
Go ahead, carry on with your story if you got more to tell.